Hola everybody, this is Jordan coming at you with the free bonus video for the puzzle strategy. So puzzle strategy part 2, where we're going to continue with the article and get at least a couple paragraphs in. I'm not sure how far we're going to get. I'm not sure how long this is going to take. So what I'll do real quickly is go through what we already went through in the main part, and then we'll continue on where we left off. Now, the point of this video isn't to teach you all the conjugations or to teach you about the pronouns or to teach you any vocab, actually. It's not to teach you anything other than the process of the puzzle strategy. I'm going to go through this article basically how I would naturally go through it, except commenting to you, kind of what's going on in my mind. I'm going to look up words when I would normally look up words. Most of the conjugations I'm already familiar with. I'll show you a few and we'll go from there. Now, it's a little hard to highlight text on this El País article. The link is below this video to the original article. So I copied the text into Google Drive here. This is a Google worksheet or whatever they call it. And that way I can highlight text easier. And then also open here in this tab is wordreference.com, which is my preferred online dictionary. I like it for several reasons. I'll show you throughout this video why. You can use any online dictionary, but Google Translate isn't really a dictionary, it's a translator. So I do suggest using either a book dictionary or an online dictionary of some kind. And then this is the website I use. This is SpanishDict.com/conjugation. The link is right here and I'll put it below this video. And this is where I get all the conjugations. You put a verb in the infinitive form here, it gives you all the conjugations. I used to have a book with all the conjugations. This is nice to have this. So use any site you want as long as it gives you all the conjugations. So reviewing what we saw last time, elecciones en Peru, that's pretty obvious, elections in Peru. Keiko Fujimori is a person, and she said, respetaré, I will respect. We know it's I will respect because respetar is to respect, and the E with the accent means it's the future first person, so I will respect. If you didn't know that, you need to learn the word respetar, and then you need to learn future conjugations. Respetaré la no reelección presidencial. I will respect the no re-election presidential. I will respect no presidential re-election. And as you will see in a second, la no reelección presidencial is a specific term that they're using in Peru right now for the elections. You'll see it in quotes in a minute. Continuing on here, in 1996, Alberto Fujimori, which is Keiko's father, so Keiko is running for president right now, she said this, then her father, Alberto Fujimori, promulgó una norma de interpretación auténtica. Promulgó, I didn't know what that meant, so I looked it up. Promulgar is the infinitive verb, and it means to enact a law, remember? And the O with the accent means the preterite tense. So it's third person preterite tense. Alberto Fujimori enacted una norma, a policy, a law, whatever you want to call it, of authentic interpretation, adjective after the noun, interpretation is the noun, auténtica is the adjective, de la Constitución, of the Constitution, y se presentó a la reelección. Se presentó is the reflexive verb of presentarse, and presentarse means to introduce, to present yourself for re-election, a la reelección. And the important thing here is a la reelección means for re-election. So a la means for in this case, oddly. Prepositions can just mean anything. I'm going to make a video. The next video I make is going to be how prepositions work, and I'll go more into that right now. But basically, they're just wildcards. You have to remember that a is used with reelección. So in 1996, Alberto Fujimori, Keiko's dad, enacted a policy of authentic interpretation of the Constitution and presented himself, that's what reflexive verbs mean, you do it to yourself. He presented himself for re-election. So now continuing with the first paragraph, and again, you saw this in the main video as well, but we're going to go over it real quickly. And I'll slow down for the rest of this. After this first sentence that we've already seen, I'll slow down and go through this real slowly just to give you a better feel for how to figure this stuff out on your own. And then I'll go through it. I'll probably speed up a little bit as we go further down in the article. So, los 10 candidatos, the 10 candidates, a la presidencia, for the presidency, and again, a la presidencia is for the presidency. We can just tell by context. So, presentó a la reelección, a means for there, but the isn't really being said in English. He presented himself for re-election. Here, the la is being used. The 10 candidates for the presidency de Peru, of Peru celebraron, celebrated, and we looked that up in the other video and we saw that that also commonly translates to hold or held in this case. So held the Sunday un debate electoral, an electoral debate, previo, and we looked this up and we saw that prior was the best translation for that, a los comicios de esta semana, to the elections of this week. And comicios, I didn't know at the time, so I looked it up. So the 10 candidates for the presidency of Peru celebrated Sunday an electoral debate prior to the elections of this week, or to this week's elections. And now here we are, we're gonna start where we're gonna pick up where we left off last time. La favorita, Keiko Fujimori, the favorite, Keiko Fujimori, and it's la favorita and not el favorito there because Keiko is a woman. If they were talking about a man, they would say el favorito, but in this case it's la favorita. La favorita, Keiko Fujimori, Fuerza Popular, and Fuerza Popular means popular force. So force is the noun, popular is the adjective, and you can tell by the capital letters here that it's the name of her party. So if this is your first article in the newspaper about politics, you wouldn't recognize that, but if you've read any before, and context would probably tell you right now, that's the name of her party. It's called Popular Force. So the favorite, Keiko Fujimori of Popular Force, aseguró, and I'm telling you right now, that means assured. Asegurar is the verb that means to assure, and the O with the accent is the preterite tense, the third person, because it's talking about Keiko Fujimori, she assured. If you didn't know that, you could come in here, copy aseguró, and be like, what's that mean? You go to the dictionary and it'll tell you right away that it comes from asegurar, okay? And then look at secure, claim. You can use this word for many different things, but one of them is assure, and that fits the context that we have in this article, and it looks like the English word anyway, and it looks like the Spanish word. So aseguró is she assured, que respetará, and that looks a lot like respetaré, because it is a lot like it, except it's the third person in the future of respetar now. So respetaré is I will respect. This word is respetará, she will respect, or he will respect, in this case, Keiko Fujimori. La no reelección presidencial. And there's that term we saw earlier. Now it's in quotes to make it real clear that it's a specific term. So the favorite, Keiko Fujimori of Popular Force Party, assured that she will respect the no re-election presidential. She assured everybody that she will respect that there's no presidential re-election. Then continuing on here, de acuerdo a la Constitución. Now, de acuerdo is a very common phrase. It means according to, basically. So according to the Constitution. If you didn't know that, I'm not sure what it would say in the dictionary. Let's see here. Okay, sure, all right, because if somebody says something and you agree, you could say de acuerdo, but that's not what we're talking about here. According to, so de acuerdo a, I think is what the example was here, de acuerdo a la Constitución, according to the Constitution, el mandato presidencial, the presidential mandate, and mandate basically just means term here though, es de 5 años, is of 5 years, y, and, un ex-presidente, an ex-president, solo puede volver a postular. He can only, an ex-president only, solo means only. Anytime you don't know this, you look it up. Puede is a conjugation of poder. Now, that's irregular, so let's see what would happen if you typed in puede here, because you might not recognize that that comes from poder, but it tells you it came from poder. That's very nice. So poder means can, be able to, could. So an ex-president, that means, solo means a lot of things, and you would find this out by typing it in, but here it just means only, I think. Alone, single, lone, alone, solo, only. Only can, volver is return, to postular. Postular, you know, I don't know what that specifically means. I would probably not look it up if I wasn't making this video, because I would just take the vibe of to post. So let's see if that's right. It's probably not right, but basically I'm gonna say only return to run, transcorrido, otro per, to return to post during another period constitutional. Let's see what's going on here. Apply for, stand for, run for, which is what I thought it was. Now transcorrido is like during or something. Pass, go by, pass, passing. Otro periodo constitutional, another constitutional period. So let's go back and look at the whole thing. According to the Constitution, the presidential mandate is 5 years. Now they say es de 5 años because that's how they talk, but we don't say of. So is 5 years, and an ex-president only can run again after a constitutional period. So you're president for 5 years, you can be president again, but only after somebody else is president for 5 years. In 1996, su padre, and we're still talking about Keiko Fujimori, so su can mean he or she, or her, it can mean her or his, or yours, formal, but in this case we know it's Keiko Fujimori, so su padre, her father, Alberto Fujimori, promulgó, and we know that's, okay, and this is the same thing from the headline actually. Alberto Fujimori promulgó, enacted, una norma, a policy, de interpretación auténtica, of authentic interpretation, de la Constitución, of the Constitution, y se presentó, and presented himself, that's a reflexive verb in the preterite tense, so presented himself, a la reelección, for re-election. So the 10 candidates for the presidency of Peru celebrated Sunday an electoral debate prior to the elections of this week's elections. The favorite, Keiko Fujimori of Popular Force, assured the world that she will respect no presidential re-election. According to the Constitution, the presidential term, or the presidential mandate, is 5 years, and an ex-president can only run again after a constitutional period. Let's look up pass, go by. Okay, so that means after another okay, so that's what it is. An ex-president can only run again, postular, volver a postular, run again, after basically when another constitutional period has passed. Transcurrido is passed. So another constitutional period will be 5 years. In 1996, her father, Alberto Fujimori, enacted a policy of authentic interpretation of the Constitution and presented himself for re-election. So basically, you have to wait 5 years to run for re-election. In 1996, he authentically interpreted the Constitution and ran again right away. Moving on to the next paragraph, en su intervención, and su is still hers, unless we have a reason to change, it's still for Keiko. So, en su intervención final, in her final intervention, en el debate presidencial, in the presidential debate. So intervention here is kind of just her final plea to the people, basically, her final way to intervene with the vote, with the election. In the presidential debate, realizado, and realizado is kind of like celebrar in a way. Let's see what the dictionary says realizar means. It kind of just means something happened, to make, carry out, fulfill yourself, realize. You know, we would use realized, we could use realized like this in English too, we just don't that much. They use realizar, or in this case, the past participle or whatever that's called, realizado, realized, much more often. So the presidential debate that was carried out, that happened, that occurred, el domingo, once again, they use the article and we don't, Sunday, en Lima, in Lima. In her final intervention in the presidential debate that occurred Sunday in Lima, una semana, 1 week, antes de. Antes de is a very common phrase. I guess that's a prepositional phrase or something like that. I'll cover that in the next video probably. But it means before. Antes de often comes after antes. Maybe always, but often. Before las elecciones, the elections generales. So las elecciones generales, the general elections, en Peru. Now notice generales, in English we would say general elections, but in Spanish they say elections generals because the adjective often goes after the noun and it has to match, it has to be plural since elections is plural. So elecciones generales is general elections in Peru. La favorita, the favorite, en las encuestas. Encuestas, I don't know what encuestas is. Let's check out encuestas. Survey poll. The favorite in the polls, Keiko Fujimori, Líder de Fuerza Popular, leader of Popular Force. Popular Force is the name of her party. Firmó, firmar is to sign, and the O with the accent means preterite, so signed un compromiso, and I think that looks a lot like compromise. It is, or it could be any kind of treaty, or let's see what they say for compromiso. It's a compromise basically, but it could be like a written thing. It's not exactly the way we use it. Agreement, predicament, types of dilemma, engagement, commitment, obligation, commitment, agreement. So I've just been doing this for a long time that I guess I have it kind of like internalized what compromiso. Compromiso is an agreement. Un compromiso, which is what a compromise is. And el que garantizó. Now this is, you know, I'm just gonna have to explain this in another video. That just means in which she guaranteed. Garantizar is to guarantee. The O with the accent is the preterite tense, so the past tense, guaranteed. So she signed a compromise or an agreement in which she guaranteed. En el que. Okay, and the L is from compromiso. It's complicated, but en el que means in which she guaranteed el respeto irrestricto al orden democrático. Respect, I think that's pretty obvious. Irrestricted to the orden, which is order. Democrático, which is democratic. So she guaranteed the respect, irrestricted, the unrestricted respect to the democratic order, because remember, her father didn't. Y los derechos humanos, a very common phrase when you're reading the newspaper, the human rights. Y nunca más, and nevermore. Más can mean more or a lot of things, and nunca is never, so nunca más, nevermore. Un 5 de abril, 5th de April, and 5th of April, and that's obviously some famous day of some kind. And then here you can see they talk about that. En alusión, and that looks a lot like in allusion, and it is, al autogolpe. Now, I don't remember if I've ever seen this before, but I know golpe is like a hit, but they use it for a coup, for like a political coup, they say golpe. So golpe is a blow, but then we gotta look for these like, down here, there's probably something political. Golpe de Estado, coup d'etat, yeah? That's what we're talking about right here. So just from experience, we know that he did something bad. In allusion to the auto golpe, they're calling this an auto coup or a self coup instead of a coup, because he was actually in the government and dismissed Congress and changed the Constitution. So he kind of like abandoned the democratic order, but he was already in power. So it's like a self coup, they call it, an auto golpe. If it was a regular coup d'etat, I think like if he was an outside person taking over the government and the government was somebody else, I think in that case it would be a golpe. Que dio su padre, we're talking about the golpe, in allusion to the auto coup, the self coup, que dio su padre. Now, dio is a little tricky because dio is from dar, it's in the preterite also, and I don't know what would happen if you typed in dio into the dictionary here. Let's check it out. So it does tell you that it's from dar. So you would know that it's from dar, and then I haven't showed you this yet actually. Here's how you figure out what a conjugation means if you don't know. So if you knew now you know dio comes from dar, but here, now you just have to find it in one of these charts, and it's right here. It's the preterite. So that means it's the third person preterite, so that means it's the past tense. So look for how it works. In allusion to the self-coup that gave her father, Alberto Fujimori, and that just means they're using dar for the coup here when I don't know what verb we would use in the auto coup that her father did, that her father performed, that whatever. I don't know what we would say in English, to be honest with you, but you get the picture. You just have to figure out what they say. And unless you're a translator, you don't really need to know as long as you have the right picture in your head. Then hace 24 años. I don't really have a way to explain this other than just to tell you, hace comes from hacer, the verb. It's the present tense regular conjugation of hacer in the third person. But in this case, it means 24 years ago. It's just a form of speaking that you have to get used to. And once you do get used to it, and it's really easy to get used to it, it's very easy to pick this out because hacer wouldn't really make sense there as to make or to do, which is probably what you learned hacer means. Hacer means to make or to do. But in this case, it just means 24 years ago. So hace 24 años is 24 years ago. Hace 2 minutos is 2 minutes ago. Hace 3 años is 3 years ago. That's just how you talk. Hace, some time period, means ago. Then al cerrar, al comes from a plus el, al. Al is one of the only 2 contractions in Spanish. A, el is al, so to the. Cerrar is the infinitive form of closing the Congress. So we'll come back and look at this whole thing together. Y el poder judicial, the power judicial. And since those are capital letters, we know that's like the name of something. And in this case, I think that's probably like the Supreme Court, because to the closing of the Congress and the Supreme Court, which is, I'm pretty sure what he did. Como, which can be a question word, but in this case, without the accent, it means as or like, but in this case, as preámbulo, a preamble de 8 años, of 8 years, de that's a hard word, de autoritarismo. So let's look at just this part here. In allusion to the self-coup that her father, Alberto Fujimori, did 24 years ago, closing Congress and the Supreme Court as a preamble to 8 years of authoritarianism. I can't even say it in English. So let's look at the whole paragraph now. In her final intervention in the presidential debate that transpired Sunday in Lima, a week before the general elections in Peru, the favorite in the polls, Keiko Fujimori, leader of the Popular Force, signed a compromise in which she guaranteed unrestricted respect to the democratic order and human rights, and never again in April 5th, in allusion to the self-coup of her father, Alberto Fujimori, 24 years ago, where he closed the Congress and the judicial power, the Supreme Court, as a preamble to 8 years of authoritarianism. That word that I can't say even in English.